Hi everyone, this is Quinn again. In the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and start today's call, which is our post-election community call and sharing the state of play for Southeast Asian American communities. My name is Quinn Din. I'm the Executive Director of SEARAC, the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center. I am honored to be the moderator for today with support from Suvon Lee, our Policy Associate, offering technical assistance for today's call. So if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to use your question box to send a message and we will help to troubleshoot. And if you have any questions related to the discussion that we will have, feel free to also use that question box. And later on in the call today, we will have time to open up the call to actually hear from all of you as our trusted leaders and allies and partners from across the country, and also a lot of LAT alumni who have joined us today. So on behalf of the entire SEARAC family, thank you all for joining us for the first of very many other calls that we see in our future. So we wanted to start today's call just by grounding us in where we are. And today actually marks 5 weeks since November 8th, when our nation voted for Donald Trump to become our president-elect. And for many of us, the world as we knew it shifted and changed in ways we never imagined. In the days after the election, SEARAC's team came together to mourn, recognizing that the president-elect's campaign promises of attacking immigrants, Muslims, women, people with disabilities would now not just be a campaign promise, but a blueprint of hate, sexism, bigotry, and xenophobia that would define the next chapter of our nation's history for generations to come, with potential to destroy decades worth of progress from the civil rights movement and other movements that our communities have fought for so long. We, along with so many leaders fighting for racial and social justice, saw our nation's vote as a personal attack on who we are, the values we stand for, and why we are here in America. We created space to mourn together, to dialogue, and we reminded ourselves that in this moment of great pain, that we have a responsibility to hold each other closer, love our communities harder, heal and process, root ourselves in our resilience, empower, and organize. So today, we come to you all as our trusted partners and leaders throughout the community and throughout the country, from student organizers to volunteers to philanthropy partners, to share how we're fighting for equity and justice by sharing our analysis on the political landscape and political moment, creating space to listen, reflect, and heal together, which we hope will set a foundation of many more conversations, critical conversations to come, and sharing resources to keep our community safe and providing ideas and inspiration for mobilization. So I want to start by sharing what our staff and board reflected on about this particular political landscape. And we recognized that now more than ever, that this is our political civil rights movement to demonstrate our power, to demonstrate the power of people. When political champions for equity will be difficult to find, it will be the power of people and organizing that defines our democracy. To demonstrate the power of community, when the social justice movement and social justice community has more power now more than ever with the quantity of leaders across movements. It's the progressive community's moment to realize the power of multiple social justice movements coming together, united and coordinated, because the political moment and our communities demand this of us. And to demonstrate the power of partnerships, that now more than ever, we must work in close and coordinated partnership with all of you so that we can all maximize our full potential. We combined this political analysis with feedback from community leaders during our year-long strategic planning process to clarify the leadership position that our constituents envisioned for us. Together, staff and board came together to confirm our role in this new political climate to build our community's self-determination by resisting policies that seek to destroy America's foundation of equality for all through two major positions. First, by affirming that SEARAC is a critical national voice for Southeast Asian Americans. And in our new political landscape, our role will be to voice dissent and opposition against any and all policies that attack our communities. And secondly, we reaffirmed the importance of state and local advocacy as places that will offer protective policies and resistance against harmful federal policies that seek to take away our community's core rights and voice. And this state and local power is one that we're already seeing being enacted across the country. We also came to focus on 4 key strategies in defining our strategic defense. First, community safety. We recognize that we have so many trusted leaders and allies in this space who have created infrastructure to keep our community safe, especially in reporting hate crimes and educating community members of their legal rights. In this space of community safety, our objective is to share resources and referrals to protect our community safety. In advocacy, our objective is to resist and defend against bad policies while protecting key policy provisions. We're keenly aware and prepared for an unwilling administration that may prevent us from voicing our resistance or block us from entering because of the values we uphold. We're prepared for this reality, and our plan is to shift to full mobilization and communications as our key defensive strategy. And again, we'll look to local and state policies as major offensive strategies, with California being our strongest state, with policy champions and a mobilized base who have already pushed for protective policies, including declaring California a sanctuary state for immigrants and introducing legislation that we are supporting, such as the Due Process for All Act, that ensure that all individuals detained in immigration proceedings have access to legal representation. In community engagement, we heard loud and clear from our strategic planning process that our role is to listen, educate, and convene. And to respond to these requests, we decided to start early by launching this call, which will become a standing monthly call to maintain our community engagement during a time when we anticipate that our communities will need to be as informed as quickly as possible to the changing landscape. And our 4th objective under community engagement is mobilization, to demonstrate our community's resistance through looking for partnerships to increase civic engagement for the next round of elections starting today, and also by supporting civil disobedience and political protest to demonstrate our community demand for equity. And this civil disobedience and political protest will be more important now than ever. And our final strategy of communications, our AIR strategy, is going to be essential to uplift the stories and narratives of our communities to demonstrate resistance against policies that will undermine our communities. So what are the policies that we're actually watching out for and prioritizing for SEARAC's work? First and foremost, we anticipate that immigration will be the first to come under attack, with the expansion of mass detention and deportation, especially individuals with past criminal conviction records and those who are undocumented, with potential attacks to our refugee resettlement system by refusal to admit more refugees, and finally, threats to the DACA program. In our work in immigration, we're surrounded and supported by so many partners across the immigrant rights movement, from Endelon to NACSEC, and we will commit to working collaboratively to defend our community's power against these attacks. And we recognize that SEARAC's key power and key voice will be to advocate for those with past criminal conviction records to be protected under due process and justice. Secondly, we're concerned by discussions that attack our community's civil rights, especially in the potential creation of a Muslim registry and the increase in hate crimes, which we have already seen documented to be on the rise. In this work on the Muslim registry, we will work in partnership and will be following the lead of organizations like South Asian Americans Leading Together, Empower, and 18 Million Rising, who are leading the charge in really mobilizing against this potential registry. In health, we're staunchly concerned about the repeal of the Affordable Care Act and cuts to Medicaid, including state expansion of Medicaid that allowed more than 12 million Americans and undocumented individuals to have access to health insurance. In this work, we're joined by many health organizations who have also prioritized the protection of ACA, including the APA Health Forum and APTRO, recognizing that health access is critical for everyone in our community and our families, from our babies all the way to our older adults and elders. And finally, in education, we're immediately concerned about school climate and the increased levels of race, immigrant, and religious-based attacks that have already been happening across our country. We're concerned about the potential expansion also of public charter schools and private higher education at the expense of funding more equitable public education, especially when many of these institutions have a troubled track record of exacerbating inequity across low-income communities of color and immigrant communities. And finally, we're also concerned about the President-elect's cabinet picks that could greatly hurt our communities. From Jeff Sessions for Secretary of Justice, who has been a champion of anti-immigrant policies in the Senate with a record of using racist language, with Betsy DeVoe for Secretary of Education, a nominee with no education experience, a billionaire interested only in charter schools, not for all, but predominantly for middle and upper class families, for Stephen Bannon, who's been a purveyor of false, misleading, racist, and misogynistic news, and Representative Tom Price for Secretary of Health, who wants to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. Our SEARAC team is continuing to research the background of these individuals and new nominees and submitting questions to the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee for committee hearings to ensure that there's public track record and accountability of where they stand on our community's priorities for equity and for justice. And with that broad analysis of where we see major threats and a big picture strategy of where SEARAC sees ourselves positioned, we actually created this call to have as much dialogue and discussion as possible with our community partners from across the country. And we're going to start our discussion portion. So taking moderator privilege, I'm going to set a couple ground rules in creating a safe virtual space for us to be in dialogue. One, respect. Please respect the points of view that are presented, even if they are different from your own. Secondly, please share your name when beginning. And finally, this time limit may be not as important because we have fewer people on the call than we expected, but we are suggesting that folks share their responses within 3 minutes, which will allow us to get through, or will allow us to hear from as many participants as possible. And to participate in the discussion portion, I will point you to our GoToWebinar control panel. On the far left side of your control panel, you should see a orange arrow, and about 4 icons below that, you should see an icon that looks like a hand. And we'll ask that you click on that so that we know that you are ready and interested in offering a comment, and we'll unmute your line so that we can have you share with us. And this is really an open discussion and dialogue. We have other folks from our SEARAC team on board as well, in case folks have more questions and would like more responses from us. But we welcome all comments and questions, including how you're thinking about this political moment from your perspective and what you would like to add to our analysis. What is affirming from the analysis that we shared, what's missing, and any of these remarks, along with questions, are welcome. So with that, I am going to pull up our timer. And see if there are any participants who are interested in offering any questions or remarks or comments. And if folks are more interested in submitting questions by writing questions that you would like us to respond to, feel free to use your question box. Okay, I'm sure that folks have questions because we presented a lot of information, but also a lot of information that could be clarified further. I'm just going to go ahead and share who we have on the line while folks get their thoughts together. We have Andrew Medina from Asian Americans Advancing Justice, based in Sacramento, Anne-Marie Tran from Asian Americans Community Involvement, Choya Yang from North Carolina, Diana Bui from CPACS, Gabriel Garcia, SEARAC BMOC Coordinator, Jenna McDavid with the Diverse Elders Coalition, Katrina Mari and Goia, also with SEARAC, Kevin Lamb, previously with PRISM, Maita Lor with LEAP, also previous LAT alumni, Tao Dang, and V. Lu. And if folks don't have any questions, you should also feel free to share comments or any other remarks. And since no one has a question, I guess I can propose a question myself if there's anyone who's interested in entertaining me in this discussion. But I'm really interested in hearing from folks from across the country and hearing about maybe some of the concerns that you are hearing from the constituents that you serve, either young people that you're organizing with, folks who might be working with you to enroll in health insurance, if there are any pressing issues or fears or challenges that you think SEARAC should really be aware of. We would really welcome that analysis and that information. Okay, so since this is our first, sorry, I think we might have a question coming in. Great, so this first question is from Jenna. And Jenna's with the Diverse Elders Coalition and shares that they are pretty worried about the impending attacks against the Affordable Care Act, against Medicare and Social Security, and if there are any organizations on the line who are looking to work in coalition or partnership on these issues, and any suggestions in particular about how to push back against budget cuts that are going to impact elders. And I can start with a response for Jenna, but if there are other folks who would like to also share their analysis, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll unmute your line. We understand that there is organizing materials, particularly around the Affordable Care Act, that are being developed right now as we speak in recognition of a couple key areas. So one is that it is much easier to organize and mobilize constituencies when we have something that is being put at risk or being taken away. And with 20 million individuals who have had access to the Affordable Care Act and health insurance expansion, that it's going to be much more difficult to take away these resources in the landscape of so many folks who have benefited. So we do know that the Center for Community Change as well as the PICO organizing network are creating organizing modules that will be launched hopefully by the beginning of the year. And the campaign goal really is to mobilize folks who have health insurance under the Affordable Care Act to really voice their demand for maintaining it, for raising up our stories of what it has meant to be denied health insurance because of pre-existing conditions, and now being able to have access to lengthen our life and our dignity that we have for so many more years because of these resources under the Affordable Care Act. So we do know that those resources are being developed and that they will provide an infrastructure for our constituencies to be engaged and mobilized around the Affordable Care Act. So that is one response. And the work around Medicare and Social Security will also be challenging issues. And I think what we are challenged by in this particular moment is knowing that we're going to need to sustain our resistance for so many things that are going to be attacked, one right after the other. So we're hoping that with infrastructure, with calls like this that are happening across the country, not just by SEARAC, but other organizations, that we can be kept in the loop and kept informed as quickly as possible on when these other provisions will come under attack. But from what we're hearing and understanding, it seems like ACA is going to be our first priority for health. Thank you so much, Jenna, for offering that question. And are there any other questions or comments or remarks that folks would like to share? And we'll just hang on for another minute to see if any other questions come in. We do have some polling questions to also offer some dialogue, which we will start in a couple minutes if we don't have any other questions or comments submitted. So we'll go ahead and start some of our polling questions. So we're going to start with a simple test question, just to make sure folks are able to use the poll, which is, which region of the U.S. do you represent? We have the West Coast, Midwest, South, East Coast, and prefer not to comment. For the purpose of this call, we're going to define Virginia as East Coast, and we're going to give folks about another 10 seconds if they can respond to the poll. And we'll go ahead and close that out and share our results. Oops. So it looks like the majority of our participants are from the West Coast. I think predominantly California, and then also the East Coast. Great, thank you, folks. Our second question is about the call itself today. If you found the information helpful in expanding your analysis at all of what's going on politically and how SEARAC is positioned, please feel free to submit your responses. Great, thanks, folks. So the majority of participants shared yes very much. For folks who shared somewhat, thank you so much for sharing that response. We very much look forward to any questions or recommendations that you have about information that you would find more helpful, or anything else that you're wondering about, because we really do want to use this call to gather as much feedback as possible, and hearing it directly from our trusted leaders across the country. Thank you. Just two last calls. This is to help inform next steps for us as well. So the next question is if you can share on whether you would like to hear about any of the following issues in our next calls related to immigration, health, education, criminal justice, or whatever is most urgent. And we'll give folks just a couple more seconds to log in their responses. Great, we'll go ahead and close the poll. And it looks like there is a pretty big response for immigration, as well as whatever is most urgent. So in our next call, we'll actually go ahead and combine both immigration and sharing out any actions or any new analysis that really requires a lot of attention. Thank you so much. And our last polling question of the day is, which of the following strategies would you like for us to focus on next? I know that we shared a lot of different approaches, from organizing to communications to advocacy and community engagement. We're really interested to know if there are particular approaches that you want to learn more about in this next call, or if you would like to see how they all intersect and select all of the above. I'll go ahead and give us a couple more seconds to log in your response. Great, thank you. I'll go ahead and share these results. It looks like folks are really interested in organizing and what's going on around mobilization strategies. And the next highest response is around advocacy. So we'll go ahead and really keep this feedback in mind as we prepare for our last conversation, or our next conversation, and thank you all for offering that feedback. And before we close, we are going to share a couple of resources which we thought could be helpful. If I can pull up my screen. And we actually had one last question about how our leadership and advocacy training and how our LEAF trainings are going to be responsive to a hostile administration. So most of the folks here have been an LAT participant or know about our 3-day training. So Kalia's question is how, whether or not the new administration changes our approach around the structure and the actual materials itself. This is a really, really important question, and one that our SEARAC team is also clarifying as we close out the year and begin planning for the next year. I think there are a couple of things that have become clear to us. So one is that advocacy with our elected officials will not be business as usual. We'll have to prepare our participants to enter more hostile meetings, but also meetings where educating these key leaders are going to still be important. And this is going to really require us to fine-tune our messaging and our analysis for new Republican targets. Secondly, we've also really been tasked with thinking about how we leverage our LAT and our LEAF training as critical mobilizing forces in Washington, D.C. Next year, more than ever, we're going to need to be able to actually show and demonstrate what the Southeast Asian American electorate looks like, who we are, and actually literally showing up in Washington, D.C. to really voice a different America and different policy recommendations that we want for our communities. So we will be very closely monitoring what types of actions and organizing are going to be critical for next year. Our major guess right now is that it's going to be around immigration reform, and that if immigration legislation is actually put on the table, that all of our participants will actually mobilize and be educated around one issue, so that we're all going into different offices and different targets with the same ask, and with messages that we're carrying from across the country around why immigration reform is really needed and why we can't continue to escalate mass deportation, especially for those with criminal conviction records. So that is our analysis right now of how our LAT and our LEAF training will change in light of the administration. And we also have an additional training next year called Moving Mountains, a Southeast Asian American Equity Agenda, where we are creating a equity agenda for our communities for the next 50 years. We're hoping to bring 100 leaders to Washington, D.C. to be part of this process of defining our community's vision collectively. And for this summit as well, we're also looking to really leverage the power of all the individuals who are going to be in D.C. and to really develop actions that demonstrate our community's power and increases the visibility of who we are.
One more question.
And it looks like we have one more question. The question is if SEARAC is currently working with any partnering Southeast Asian serving nonprofit organizations in the Midwest. This is a really, really great question. we have worked and are working with the Lao Assistance Center of Minnesota. We also have partnerships with Hmong American Partnership. And for those two organizations, lots of the work is around aging and education. But we've also been working with a group of individual organizers called the Minnesota 8, who have really been organizing their communities against the deportation of their family members. Jenny Saray is one of the lead organizers for that movement, with support from Vichet Chun, who is a professor at the University of Minnesota and a previous board member. So we are connected with leaders in Minnesota as our work continues into the next year. But if there are any recommendations for other groups that we should connect with, please do share them with us. And we're particularly interested in also expanding our networks in Wisconsin, where our communities are growing really quickly and where Wisconsin has proven to be a really critical swing state in this past election and what we anticipate for the next elections to come. Great. And a follow-up question is if there are ways that college students can also get involved in organizing or bringing information to their families who may be affected by the Affordable Care Act. This is a really, really good question. We don't have the final answer to it yet, but we do think that the mobilizing tools that will come out of the Community for Change and PICO network will be ones that we can distribute to our families. And we'll keep this on our SEARAC radar of making sure that our actions and our mobilization is inclusive of integrating student leaders and what they can do on campus and also with their families. And we'll still have a little bit of time, so we can give it maybe one more minute to see if there are any burning questions or comments that folks would like to share. Okay, we have one question from Christopher Larson with FIGHT, formerly incarcerated group Healing Together, based in Seattle, Washington. Thanks, Chris, for joining us. So Chris's question is if there are any actions going on now. And I should have been more prepared for this question, quite honestly. There are lots of actions going on. I think one of the most urgent actions that folks can sign on to is a petition that Empower as well as 18MR has been circulating around calling for, is denouncing the Muslim registry. After this call, we are happy to circulate that sign-on. That is a really simple action that really demands a lot of mobilizing around so that our key leaders really know how oppressive and anti-American and un-American this policy really is and how it is an attack to our communities and our religious freedoms. And it looks like we just put that particular action on our Facebook page. So please feel free to go onto our Facebook page if you'd like to join that and if you'd like to learn more about it. I'll also put a plug in here actually for Lundy Coy, who has been one of our leading advocates to really share her story around deportation or having a deportation order, especially now that she is a mother. And really her story talks about and shares how inhumane our deportation system really is in breaking apart families. She recently got a governor's pardon from the state of Virginia and has also gotten tremendous traction in terms of national media with an op-ed placed in the New York Times and also an interview that she will be taping tomorrow with CNN. So hopefully we'll be able to share that information as well. But we will be circulating a sign-on letter to call for an end to her deportation order, as well as so many others who are facing the same situation that she is, to help amplify that message a little bit more. So those are two specific items that folks can mobilize on. And if there are any others that any of you all as partners would like us to be aware of that we can plug our network in, please feel free to email that to me so that we can circulate it. And I'll also share contact information at the end. And it looks like Chris's final comment is that Seattle is proactively looking at vacating certain cases, and if there are certain states involved in looking into the same strategy. This is a really, really great question, Chris. I think that there are states that we would love to have engaged in this, particularly states with high Southeast Asian American populations, including California, Massachusetts, and Texas, as critical states there. We don't know of any specific strategies around dropping or vacating deportation cases of those with criminal conviction records on a wide scale, the way that Seattle is. But if you can, actually, you've shared with us that information, so we can connect with other states to see if this is a model that they're interested in replicating and learning more about. Great. And we did want to share a couple of resources, and these might be documents that folks are already aware of, but just in case this is new information, we shared a Know Your Rights sheet around applying for health insurance and really helping to communicate with family members that it is absolutely safe to apply for health care. And in fact, the more people we have insured, the harder it is to roll back the Affordable Care Act. We have shared our legal resource guide for Southeast Asian Americans facing criminal deportation because we understand that this will be an increasing issue, especially in the next year. We have a Know Your Rights toolkit around protecting against ICE raids. This is a fact sheet of really simple things to remind folks that they are not obligated to speak to any legal representative, or sorry, they're not required to speak to police without legal representation. This resource guide is translated into several different languages and is a really helpful safety guide to remind folks of what their legal rights are. We've shared a link to the Southern Poverty Law Center's Reporting Hate Crimes website to share with folks a resource on how you can report hate crimes related to race, immigration, gender, orientation, any of this, as a way to systematically collect data around the increasing violence that's happening across our country, and also a toolkit around the sanctuary movement in case you're interested in bringing this into your cities or your states as a policy to protect folks who may be facing deportation orders in the next year. Several of these are also handouts. I've also shared our PowerPoint in case it's helpful in sharing our analysis and approach to any of your constituencies. And then the PowerPoint also has links to these resources as well. I think we did our quick poll. So we'll go ahead and close out unless there are any questions. We would love if folks could join our next call, which is going to be January 24th, 2017. These are going to be monthly calls, but our next topic will be fighting for families, immigration, and deportation, knowing that immigration is probably going to be the first to come under attack, and we want to make sure that we're as organized and mobilized as possible. If folks have any questions or comments about this webinar or any recommendations for the next ones, please feel free to email me at quinn@searac.org. And also our webinars will be spotlighting other voices and leaders as our work continues. So this will probably be the last one where I'm the only speaker, but we really thank you all for joining us, being part of this really long movement for social justice, for equity, and we look forward to many more engagements with you. Thank you so much, everyone, and you can also view the webinar later as we've been recording this as well. We'll stay on the line just in case folks want to, if there is anyone who has any burning questions or comments, but otherwise feel free to log off early. Thank you.